Hello. Welcome to another edition of the Missouri Cherry Blossom Festival. In 1900, L. Frank Baum wrote The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It is said that it's a book that has never been out of print. Next to the Holy Bible and a few others, it's been translated to more languages than one can count. And today, we have a real treat for you. We have the great-grandson of L. Frank Baum, Roger Stanton Baum. So if you'll join us, click your heels together 3 times, and think there's no place like home, we'll learn some of the fascinating stories behind his great-grandfather, L. Frank Baum. Toto can come too. Please enjoy. So, all right, Roger, the first thing we need to do is we need to turn over the witch's hourglass because
Love it.
time, and when this sand runs out, we are done with the interview.
We run out.
Let's set that down.
Okay. So listen, first of all, I want to thank.
Go ahead.
I don't want to get out of order here, but the Cherry Blossom Festival and what everybody does there and the dedication all those people put into it and reminding us of our wonderful history that we have, both freedom and the things that we cherish. And we need more of that today than ever. And thank goodness for the Cherry Blossom Festival and people like all of you guys, and particularly you, Richard, who dedicate so much time to people and shows your love to others. I know I couldn't help. I don't want to rattle on here, but it shows your love to everyone you meet, and
Well, I'm
certainly impressed with all the movie stars you got there.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm just lucky to be at the right place at the right time. I guess that's kind of how it is.
Shaking hands with presidents, you're doing things, and everybody loves you, Reg. Thank you for having me on.
It's great to be a part of this festival, and like I said, they are an amazing group of people there in Marshfield, Missouri, and all around the nation that come to that little town every April. So I'm very lucky. Our founder, Nicholas Inman, and his wife Sarah, they host an amazing festival every year, and people just have a great time. So we look forward to next year and be live and in person. But you know, this is amazing to be able to do it this way. And still bring a little bit of the festival live to our viewers via the. Tell me, how are you and Charlene doing there up in Northern California?
Well, the nice thing about it is we're closer to our daughter and family up here. You know, I'm in love kind of where I was, and not because of any other reason, but it's basically we were there so long it was almost my home is Las Vegas, Nevada. I spent so much time there at the MGM signing books, about 7 years under contract with them. It was a personal appearance contract, and I must have spent 24. I mean, when we added it all, I was there 24 days a month. I guess I gave a good part of my life there to that. But then I got a chance to meet all the Oz fans and all those people that are so important to all of us. And
I can remember well the MGM when it was, you know, the Wizard of Oz when it opened, and they had that great, wonderful courtyard with the characters in the middle, and of course all the Oz decorations and the gift shop and everything. So I can remember it really well when they did that Wizard of Oz theme, and I was glad to see all of that go.
I think, did we meet there? I refresh my. It's been a while.
But I was a lot younger. I was a kid, and I came and I got a book signed and
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. But it's great. So let's talk about the man that we're here for, and really he's the one who started all of this. And I gave an intro earlier, said that the Wizard of Oz, next to the Holy Bible and probably only one or two other books, the only book that's never been out of and has been translated to more languages than one could count. So L. Frank Baum is you're lucky enough to have him as your great grandfather, and he came up with the wonderful Wizard of Oz. And it was published with a partner, W.W. Denslow, who was the illustrator for the book. But I want you to tell us a little bit about L. Frank Baum and how he came up with those amazing stories of the imaginary land of Oz.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, for the question. And it's one of those things that you stop to think about. A lot of our ideas come from, believe it or not, is the children themselves, the young people. And one of Great Granddad's favorite times is when he was having people over to the house, particularly the young people, the neighborhood kids, and whatnot. And Great Grandmother would serve them hot chocolate, and they'd have cookies, and they'd sit around his den, really, his office den, and he would tell stories. Well, many times these ideas would come from the kids themselves, and he would interpret them from the questions they would ask. And one of the questions, for instance, one child asked one time was, what's the name of this new land, Mr. Baum? You know, they were always formal, Mr. Baum, back in those days. And he looked around, and said, my God, the new name. And because he'd already told parts of the story here and there, and hadn't put it all together. And he looked at the file cabinet. It was in the office there. And there was, of course, a typical file cabinet, A through, C or something. The bottom drawer. He looked down at the bottom drawer, and there was O through Z, O-Z. Well, he said, well, Oz. And that is true. That's where the word Oz came from, was from a filing cabinet in his office by the question of one of his children he was telling stories to at that time. And he said, well, the new name of this land is Oz. And so that took on its own life on, and it's become the name, of course, ever since. You know, a lot of these things come from children. I personally, in my books, we have about 20 on the market now. Come from the ideas of kids. You go to classrooms like Rich, you've done, and a lot of these come from the kids themselves, and that's exactly where, to answer your question, where great granddad got a lot of his ideas was right from the kids, and Maude, his wife, would chip in with a few. So lo and behold, all of a sudden we have a new land. The word is Oz from the filing cabinet, and we were off and running.
You mentioned Maude, and let's talk a little bit about her, because unfortunately you didn't know your great granddad, but you did know your great grandmother, Maude Baum. And so tell me, what was she like as a great grandmother? To my great grandmother, what was she like?
Well, I'll tell you. First off, I just want to add that I didn't know my great grandfather. Of course, it's hard to believe Oz is 120 years old now. 120 years old. The book, and she herself was a grand lady of the old school, you might say, and she sat in her big wing chair, and I would sit on the floor in front of her, and I might be the only one in the room. So, I was always intimidated by great grandmother. She had that stern look, and had a heart of gold, but had that stern look, and scared me half to death in her own way. And I would ask her questions, and she would return the answer. And she was a person that was loved by so many, and was, you might say, great grandfather's right hand lady, right hand person. She gave him ideas. She would criticize him. Boy, she would tell him, no, that doesn't sound good. No, I don't like that. And then she'd tell him the opposite when things were good. And it gave him encouragement and a border, you might say, a border to his thinking. And thank goodness for great grandmother. In a way, her own family was a great part of Susan B. Anthony's crew. Her mother, am I right, babe? Yes. Her mother was part of the ones, there was three of them, Susan B. Anthony and the other two, Maude Baum, Matilda Gage. They're the ones that wrote the treatise on the women's rights. It was quite a volume, quite a tome. And they would, not too many people know that. So great grandmother was, inherited that type of thinking. She was a great person, a believer in women's rights, activist, and that translated over to great granddad, who, boy, he listened to her carefully, and he was fortunate enough to marry her. Her mother didn't think great granddad was a very good catch. Thought he was a real bum because his background was in musicals, and he was an artist of sorts. He was an actor. He was an actor, and her mother thought, you don't want to marry an old bum actor, doesn't make any money and all that. And she said, well, I am. She said, well, you can leave our home if you marry him. And she said, well, I guess I'll be moving. And so
was not too good of a success businessman in the beginning, and after he found his niche and that he actually made a success. But they bought a piece of property there in Hollywood, which is now unfortunately gone, but it's an amazing historical house that was called Oscon. And tell us a little bit about going to Oscott and what that was like.
Well, Oscott, remember I was very, very young. I have this flashback. Of course, they had those geese around the ceiling, and they would, that was part of the decorations the great granddad put in. I've forgotten the story why that was true, but he made the whole ceiling around the edges, around the corners, all geese, pictures of geese. And I think maybe it came out from Mother Goose in prose. It was a book that a lot of people are not that familiar with, but called Mother Goose in prose. And at that particular time, he was involved with that. And I think that's probably lent itself to Oscott in the sense of the part of the decor there. He was the place that I remember was just basically the one room. It was Spartan, it was Spartan in its furnishings. It did well, and for them, and it was a place that he could kind of hide and hibernate and write. And great grandmother loved Oscott in their own way, and they were a very happy couple in that particular house. And Oscott was a special place for everyone. They gather, and all the kids again, the neighborhood kids that come over there.
The neighborhood kids that would converse onto Oscott and listen to the stories that you're tell. And there are stories about some woozies. And so I know someone who actually owns a woozie, and I think he may have got it from you guys, Walter. And so tell us about the woozie. Did he make them? And was that just another character that he came up with?
I gave that to him for his collection because he was such a big Oz fan, and so I was given that by a friend, and was authenticated. Great grandma. I'll tell you a little bit about the woozie. First of all, the woozie is really a character that has not much of a history in Oz, except he was a guy that was an animal that had a kind of a bad temper. The Munchkins would corral him, put him in a yard with fences, and he sometimes got out of hand. But the woozie was just had a place in Oz, really a minor place, but everybody thinks of it. I think it's a name, woozie. I like to know what it came from myself, but I got this piece. Great granddad made an Uzi in his garage and carved it and formed it. The neck was a spring, and the tail was kind of a wooden thing that came out from was tacked on with a nail, and it was really kind of shellacked up and made kind of fun. His body was a box. His head was really in the form of a box. But a terrible temperament and didn't get along much with anybody. But the Munchkins, nonetheless, put him in a fenced yard, let him roam, let him hop around. But that's about the story of the woozie. Nothing much to him except this wonderful imaginative line and name that great granddad was so famous for.
I got to see Walter. Walter just posted a video last week. You know, his collection's amazing, and one could only wish for the amount that is in his collection. But he did post the video of the woozie prominently in his cabinet, and about how you all get. That was really special. So talk about.
I've always wondered why the woozie had gained so much of a reputation of following when he has so little background to, really actual background in Oz, except maybe it's because he was the antithesis of many of the characters were loving and so forth. Here was this woozie going, kind of a crazy animal that would kind of had a bad temper and everything else. So maybe it was just the opposite. Maybe that's attractive.
I think, speaking of bad tempers, I think that happens a lot with characters in books and movies. And since, there's another character in the movie that, or characters in the movie that are very popular with Oz collectors and Oz fans, and that's the flying monkey. So, you know, the flying monkeys are very amongst Wizard of Oz fans, and kind of, you know, gained their own fans out there. There's a whole series of flying monkey websites and costume players who dress up as flying monkeys and everything. I had a chance to buy an actual flying monkey, which of course were rubber.
My God.
1939 movie, and I bid a certain amount, but then it got a little too rich for my blood, so I didn't get one.
No. Well, they are priceless. I tell you, if you get your hands on anything original Oz from the movie, it is priceless. It's such a wonderful following worldwide. You know,
Yeah.
Oz.
I'm lucky enough to have some straw that me. I wrote to him, and as well as a few pieces of plywood that was supposedly used on the Yellow Brick Road there at the MGM studios. But I knew Harry Monty, who played one of the winged monkeys, and he was a little person there in Hollywood, and he got to play one of the winged monkeys, and he told me some great stories about what it was like to be strung up in the rafters of the MGM sound stages. Tell us a little bit about your lineage, from your grandparents to your grandfather, and then your father. Tell us a little bit about that, and what your grandfather Frank Baum told you about his dad.
Well, great granddad was, as I mentioned before we came on the air officially, I guess, was not great granddad, but my grandfather was a retired general in the U.S. Army. He received that on retirement. That was the rank they gave him as a retired person. He had very strict, very very loving person. I'll never forget the time he came out when I was just a child. Most of his time was the fact that he came out with his full uniform and all his medals. And boy, was I impressed as a child. He did that for me, I think. And he came into the room unexpectedly to me, and I still have these flashbacks. And here he was. He had medals from eye to shoe, it seems like. He was a fellow that was part of a family that believed in the goodness of people. I think that rubbed off on everybody. Great granddad was certainly that way. He believed in things that we don't always see so much today of, and we need more of it, and particularly in our schools, where we need, if you don't mind me on a bandstand a little bit, but we need more government in schools, talking to government. Oz speaks to the goodness of people, love, courage, and wisdom, all those things that the characters themselves represent. For instance, the Scarecrow with his wisdom, the Tin Woman with his heart, Dorothy with her love, Lion with his courage. All those characters are part of our country, really, and its background. And yet, in the schools today, we're not teaching government today. I go to schools and talk to the kids many times, and we don't see that. I won't stay on this bandstand much longer, but we need more of this history. We need more of the geography. When the kids are asked where their country is on the map, they can't find it, or they can't find their state. And so those things are important. And I think Oz, I'm off the track, but Oz was one of those things you could always come back to and find if you looked hard enough, or not so hard, you could find those things right in the Oz book. And you just took a step back and said, my golly, this is perfect for my child to read. There's no violence to speak of. And speaking of the winged monkeys, the winged monkeys are the kind of thing that most of the parents today say, oh my God, the winged monkeys are scary. And I said, compared to what? They really weren't. And so there wasn't any violence in Oz. And so great granddad was that type of person. Great. My dad was a person who followed that prescription. He always taught me to be good and try to do my best. And of course, in my day, which goes back a while, 91 years old here, goes back a while to the point where I still remember the lessons and some of the teachings, and then I compare them to the Oz books. And by the way, Rich, as you know so well, he wrote 62 books. Many of those were under pen names. And a lot of people don't realize they have Oz in their libraries because it's under a pen name of some kind or some other title like the James Mazes and so forth. All wonderful books. But fortunately for Oz, it kept his real name, his actual name. And that's not, when the movie was made, a lot of people are familiar with Oz because of the movie.
Yeah, let's
And
talk a little bit about that because Maude, your grandmother was alive when the movie was made, and in fact, she got to go to the premiere, which was held at Grand Theater in 1939 there in Hollywood. So, what was her take on the movie and your family, and what did that movie mean to you as a kid? Growing up knowing that because of your great grandfather, one of the most American classic movies in history will be forever. So, what did Maud think of The Wizard of Oz in 1939 when it was released?
well, thanks for saying that. First of all, I certainly hope it will be there forever. And uh, it's what was it like? Is your question basically you're saying?
Yeah, you knew every year when that came on television that it was because of your great grandfather that was being aired on television. And really, that's when the Wizard of Oz, the movie now, we've kind of transitioned out of the book for a second and gone to the movie. But that the Wizard of Oz really became super popular and worldwide was in its first airing on television. So what was that like growing up knowing that your grandfather was responsible for all of that, your great grandfather?
Well, naturally, I think we were a little bit humbled and very didn't we weren't too braggadocio. We were very proud to be a part of the family. It certainly hasn't hurt my writing, my promotion. To be all honest, there's it's true, and it's one of the reasons too. Now it's gotten so predominant. It's now in 72 different languages worldwide, and I understand it actually has outsold the Potter books. That's hard to believe, isn't it? Because we see Potter everywhere. Well, the rate Oz just doesn't need that much publicity. It runs on its own momentum, and on a worldwide basis, it has outsold Potter. Of course, it has had I'm bragging a little bit, but on the other hand, it's had a head start. It's been around for 120 years, and so it's really had a head start out of most books. It's really America's first true American fairy tale, and even the robot TikTok, named after one of our dogs, but our dog is named after the robot. TikTok was the first really robot in literature. It was a character that ran on mostly a mechanical system. You had to wind up his head for his brain to work, and you wound up his body for his body to work. So somebody would always have to keep him wound up, both keys, one for his head, one for his brain, in other words, one for his body. And if one ran down before the other, he was stuck by just having his brain working, not his body, or vice versa. Could be quite a problem. But there you go with another first for Oz, robot. Probably we can't think of any other one that is first.
Going back to the book written and published in 1900, is that this book was a very expensive book to publish because of the illustrations by W. Denslow, and it was quite an expensive book, I understand, to publish for its time. So tell us about that a little bit. And I know their relationship was a solid relationship in the beginning, and it kind of went a little bit bad towards the end. But Tell us about how those two got together as far as the publishing of the book.
That was quite a battle with the publishers, the publisher, Lee. What they finally came to an arrangement, a compromise. They didn't want to publish the book in color because it was so expensive. Color and printing in the color in those days for a book was almost prohibitive. And great granddad was insistent, and he made a promise. He said, "Look, I'll tell you what, you hold back the rest of my royalties on my other books, and let's get this one published in color." So he forgot his royalties and all the other books that he had written up to that time. Like I said, he wrote, he's 63 books in his lifetime. Most of them were novels, so quite a work. And so when he gave up that, the publisher finally relented and said, "Okay, we'll do this in color." But he wasn't going to see any royalties for a while from his other books until they saw the success of this one. It really broke the ice for many books, many other authors to have their books done in color because of great granddad's, insistence. And thank goodness he had the background of the books on the market to go ahead and back up what he was promising. And so the publisher said, "Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and do this in color."
Was Maude a little bit reluctant to sell the rights to the book?
The rights, that's a mystery to my side of the family. Always wondered how that all worked out. Not sure.
Louis B. Mayer actually bought the book. He bought the book with the intention of having Shirley Temple play the part of Dorothy.
Yeah.
Also, there's a question I had to ask you as far as, and see if you ever had heard this. There are so many myths regarding The Wizard of Oz, both the book as well as the movie. We'll talk about a couple here in a second, but one of them is the name Dorothy. And there are a couple stories that the name Dorothy may have come from a prominent banker's daughter in Chicago that was either friends with your great-grandfather or W.W. Denslow. And do you know any of that story, or have you heard about Dorothy?
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I've heard that side of it. What I understand it came from, and of course, all this is subject to possibilities, but was from a child in the neighborhood who was very dear. She wasn't that well of a child, health-wise. She loved great-granddad and great-grandma, would show up with the rest of the kids for story time, and her name was Dorothy. And so he went ahead and ended up naming Dorothy because of her. Okay. And just the illness. She was not well, and I think they thought this would be a wonderful thing for her and her family.
What do you think that Maude, or what do you hear that Maude, how she thought of the movie, what she thought of it?
She loved it. She used to go on the set with Judy Garland, and they would talk, and they would sit around and talk and chit chat. She got to know Judy pretty well.
That movie, 16 years old. And again, we went back and we said that, Louis B. Mayer had initially bought the rights and was going to make the movie for Shirley Temple. But it was understood that Shirley did not have the pipes to get out.
That's it. Boy, I tell you, Richard, I got to tell you, yeah, that's exactly on Mark. She didn't have the voice. You're right, and Judy did. And they wanted somebody who could really belt out those famous songs, Over the Rainbow and so forth. And Judy fit the bill. It's kind of one of those things that you can say in 5 words. Judy had the talent, the singing talent. And it's not to say that Shirley Temple wouldn't have been able to make a wonderful Dorothy, but it it wouldn't have been the same.
No,
Without,
and you talked about Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and a few years back, I got to take Jerry Marin, who was a dear friend of mine, and I knew you knew Jerry very well. Jerry was surviving of the little people of the original Munchkins, played the leader of the Lollipop Guild, gave Judy the lollipop. Well, several years ago, I took Jerry to now Sony Pictures, which was the old MGM lots, and he hadn't been back to the studio in years and years and years. But he and I got a private tour of the sound stages and all the areas, including the Munchkinland soundstage. And we got to stand on the spot that Judy recorded Over the Rainbow in the recording studio, and that was just amazing. But can you imagine that the makers of the film actually cut Over the Rainbow in the beginning, in the first cut, because they thought that it was too long, and they thought it wasn't distinguished enough for an MGM star to sing in a barnyard. But luckily it prevailed, and Somewhere Over the Rainbow made it into the film and really became Judy Garland's signature song.
I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true.
Richard, that's so true. And another thing that was a hiccup there for a while was when they were writing the music, it was Irving Berlin, I believe. They couldn't, when they wrote the song, it just didn't sound right. It didn't come out the way you hear it today. It was something that they fought over and really had a hard time making it the way it is, and make it so popular, make it so sentimental, and such a wonderful melody. And one of the things that finally Irving Berlin told them, and I'm trying to think of the name. I'm so embarrassed right now. I can't think of the two songwriters.
Harold Arlen and
yeah. Thanks, Rich. Thank you. Boy, that's terrible. But thank you for your help. Yes. And they didn't like it. And Irving Berlin, merely with his genius, said, just slow it down. They had it at a much more of a higher tempo. And they said, just slow it all down. So they, whatever it is in music they do, but they cut it down to a reasonable tempo. And all of a sudden you hear what you hear today. So it was really
that Irving Berlin, which is, of course, one of the most famous songwriters in American film history, was responsible for letting those two guys know, hey, this is what you want to do to get the song right, is slow it down a little bit. And so thanks to his help.
Richard, you ought to be on the other end of this phone call, because I think you know most of this anyway, but that's true.
I'm a Goose aficionado. I have to say, my wife always gets on me, because anytime it's on TV, and it was on TNT last week, a series of days over the course of the week, anytime it's on, I turn it in and at least watch just a little bit of it. I probably watch it at least a couple times a year at least, and have done so ever since I was a kid. And the reason I became such an Oz fan was because it really meant to me my childhood. And I remember what it was like, just like every other American kid growing up, to sit in front of the television set once a year and watch that magic happen. And it was magic. And it was interesting that we talked about the book and how expensive it was to do in color, because it was expensive for the same sense to do a film in 1938 in color. And it was actually one of the first films that was done in Technicolor simultaneously with made at the same time. They used every single light in Hollywood to light those sound stages at the MGM because of the Technicolor and that brand new Technicolor film. So to imagine what it was like when she opened the door from Kansas to the imaginary land of Oz, and Munchkinland. That was just incredible. So that's kind of where I go when I was for my love of Oz. But let's talk a little bit about the movie and some of the myths behind the movie, because there are so many legends that are associated with the Wizard of Oz, and one of them is associated with your great grandfather, and that is that of the actor Frank Morgan. Actually played a series of characters in the movie. He played the coach, the carriage driver. He played the doorman. He played, of course, the wizard from the Wizard of Oz. But he also played in the beginning of the movie Professor Morgan's coat that he's wearing in the beginning of the film says that it actually belonged to your great grandfather L. Frank Baum, and that when they opened the inside of it in the pocket, it actually said L. Frank Baum. And the story goes that Maude had donated a bunch of your great grandfather's clothes to the Salvation Army. And of course, back then, the MGM costumers used to go around to Salvation Armies and places like that to get some of the costumes. So is there any story, I want you to see if you can put this, is there any truth to the story that actor Frank Morgan was wearing your great grandfather's coat in the beginning of the film?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And like I said earlier, Rich, you can take the other side of this interview. Well, by the way, I'd like to regress just a moment on the previous question, how much you enjoyed it and watched it. And just add a little whipped cream to that. Ted Turner, who owns the movie rights still to this, every time he wants to increase his ratings for a particular night, he doesn't do it as much as he used to, but every time he wanted to increase his ratings, he put on The Wizard of Oz, and that would increase the ratings of Turner Network tremendously, because everybody would watch that no matter what else was on. So if there was something really competing that he didn't want and he wanted his program to shine, he'd put on The Wizard of Oz. Anyway, that's another situation, just thought I'd tell you.
Do you remember when you first saw the movie?
Oh, my golly, I don't. 91 years old here, Rich. You know, I can barely hold the receiver here. Anyway.
Set it up. You've got to set it up somewhere against something, and then you don't have to hold it.
Well, yeah. Anyway, listen, on the wizard's coat thing, this really goes to a situation where, as I refresh my memory, the coat itself was was picked out by Frank Morgan, and it came, I'm gathering my thoughts, obviously. He didn't like the original coat that the wardrobe department had issued him. And he just didn't like it. I didn't think it had the wizard's touch of feeling or taste for him. So they went to different studios, wardrobe departments, and they couldn't find the coat that would fit Frank Morgan's needs. Finally, they said, "Well, Frank, why don't you go out and look at some of the used clothing stores around Hollywood and see if you can find one. Maybe you can find one." So he and one of the other people, I don't know who it was, went with him, and he went to different clothing stores, and finally, after hunting and everything else, he found a coat that he liked. Well, he brought it back, put it on. They had it tailored for him. It all looked good. He was happy, and put it on. And that's the one he played with in the movie. However, there was a label on the inside of that coat, and it was faded. It had been washed. The coat had been washed several times, obviously, over the years, and that label had become dull. It was hard to read. But you still can make it out carefully if you looked, I guess. And so this time they really looked. And they studied the label and put it under light and all that kind of thing. And sure enough, on that label was the name L. Frank Baum, written in great-granddad's handwriting. And wouldn't you know it, the coat itself, the one he wore in the movie, was actually great-granddad's coat. And it was one that he wore and had given away, like you say, Salvation Army. And it became part of the movie. It became one of the clothing that was worn. Just amazing story, one in a million. And that's true of a lot of things about Oz. You know, it has so much mystery and wonderful things about it. And we keep discovering new and more and better things as we go through the years.
Talking about clothing and what it meant to the movie, the most famous movie memorabilia piece in history has to be these beautiful ruby slippers, and these are exact replicas that I have.
Those are original. What are you talking about, Richard? Those are the real McCoy.
I wish they were the real McCoy. Tell me about it. I wish they were, but they're pretty good replicas that a friend of mine made for me with the orange felt on the bottom, and they even have Garland's name inside, and they're two different sizes because a lot of folks didn't realize, but Judy had two different size feet. So they are two sizes, but they're different than
know that, Rich.
Yeah, than father's original idea, because in the books they were silver slippers, and from what I understand, silver didn't really film well, and because they were shooting in Technicolor, they decided to change the color from silver to ruby red, and of course there's no rubies on the slippers. They were made of sequins and all hand done, but it was interesting that they chose to change the color, and then of course the ruby slippers have become the most iconic piece of film memorabilia and most recognizable in the history of cinema.
Yeah, that's true. As a matter of fact, the Smithsonian Institute has a pair. You probably know this, Rick. And they say it's their most popular exhibit. The kids come, they find out about it, and they want to see it.
They just redid the whole exhibit a couple of years ago, and the ruby slippers feature prominently now in their own area of the Smithsonian. And of course I was stationed in Washington for so many years, so every time we would be downtown, or I would take folks, family, friends to the Smithsonian, I'd line for those ruby slippers. But what a lot of people don't know about those slippers is actually those were some of the rehearsal slippers that were used. Those particular slippers in the Smithsonian that Judy actually used during a lot of the rehearsal sequences, and that's where the orange felt came from on the bottom of them. But hey, Roger, I think we lost your.
There you go. Here we are. Good. One of the things, getting back to what we were talking about on the color and the slippers and the Smithsonian and whatnot, and you hit it right on the head. The only thing to make it a little more understandable, when you actually picture silver on yellow, the yellow brick road, like you alluded to, but in a little more detail, explaining it, that when you see the silver on the yellow, it kind of washes out. Silver and yellow just don't contrast well. So again, like you said, Rich, so elegantly, is that the shoes ruby really work against yellow, and that's the history behind that color a little bit.
Mystery in Hollywood and scandal in Hollywood.
Charlie,
stories of the ruby. There are countless stories of the ruby slippers in Hollywood. There were 7 pair, there were 6 pair, there were 5 pair. But and how they were found for the auction.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. You're still with us? I can see you. You can see me. So, but the ruby slippers were actually discovered in a storage rack at the end of the studios.
I can't hear him.
Well, get your hand away from them. Okay.
They discovered the slippers. They had somebody out to.
We're having trouble hearing you now, Rich.
Okay.
Why would you do that?
Can you hear me now? Can
There.
How's that
Oh,
now?
Press the volume.
what happened? The volume went down and something. I don't know.
Well, I was just talking about the ruby slippers and the kind of the lore and the mystery behind the ruby slippers. You know, that there were 7 pair originally, maybe there were 8 pair, there were 6 pair. They were lost forever in the studios, and it was only until 1970 when a person came in that MGM had hired to go through their costume departments, and they were having an auction because MGM had a lot of financial troubles back then. They decided to sell most of their stock of movie memorabilia, costumes, set pieces. Tell the folks how we can get any of your books or possibly see some of your work or get anything that you'd like to talk about or anything, and then we'll close.
Sure. And well, just really to make it simple for everyone and to remember, it's just Google my name, Roger S. Baum, S as in Sam Baum, and you'll find my website there. It'll show. There's another one which is ozauthor.com, and but just my name will do it. It pops up. There's articles from People magazine there, and several other articles I hope people will find interesting. And at the same time, we have about 19 books on the market now. We're working on another one. Pelican Press, I hope, are looking at that carefully. Disney's looking at another book for me. So maybe we'll see some more Oz out there for people to enjoy. I'm doing my best to try.
I probably have over 100 different copies of from different languages and all that, but what a great gift it would be for anybody to have or give during the holidays or for special occasions is a copy of The Wizard of Oz or any of your books. I mean, imagine getting a book from the great-grandson of the creator of The Wizard of Oz.
Well, thank you. And I'm honored to see you. It's been a long time. You have a wonderful family. Your military history, Richard, is outstanding.
Thank you.
When you're dressed up in that uniform with all your medals, I can barely see you because of the medals.
I told people, they asked me about all my medals, and I always told people, I just went to the store to clothing sales and bought whichever. I'm looking at the witch's hourglass, and it's almost out of its magical sand, so that means our time is up.
Okay.
We encourage you to come back, Roger, and join us for the 2021 Missouri Cherry Blossom Festival held in Marshfield, Missouri. It will be the 15th annual live event. So we encourage you to come back and join us then. But Roger, Charlene, thank you so much. You guys stay safe out there in Northern California. And everyone, thank you for tuning in to the wonderful Wizard of Oz and the history of the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
Well, I just want to say quickly, I'm honored to see you and meet you and all your thousands of fans. So this is really an honor for me, and I appreciate it.
Thanks again, Roger. Take care, you guys, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you. Thanks, Rich.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You're out of the woods, you're out of the dark, you're out of the night. Step into the sun, step into the light. Keep straight ahead for the most glorious place on the face of the earth or the sky. Hold on to your breath, hold on to your heart, hold on to your home. You're out of the woods, you're out of the dark, you're out of the night. Step into the sun.